My name is Galina, I am 67 years old. 5 years ago, I lost my hearing. When it returned, I didn't immediately tell my family about it. And thank God I didn't. Because the very next day, I heard something I would have been better off not hearing. But maybe that's what saved me. If you're watching this video, write down which city you're from. I really want to know how far my story has traveled. Now listen. I have lived in Tver my whole life. I am an ordinary woman, not a professor, not a heroine, just a wife. A mother and now a grandmother, as they say. 5 years ago, I lost my hearing. Not gradually, not due to age, but suddenly, as if all the sound in the world had been turned off. It happened at home, on a perfectly ordinary day. I was cleaning my husband Nikolai's study. We had an old, Soviet-era wooden stepladder, heavy and creaky, but I still used it. I was too used to it. I climbed up to dust the bookshelves, and at some point, one of the steps just gave way under me. I fell. I hit the floor hard, but that wasn't the worst of it. As I fell, my head hit the edge of Nikolai's desk. The desk was old, massive, with sharp corners, a real, sturdy piece of furniture, like they used to make. After that, it was the hospital, tests, doctors. They diagnosed me with an inner ear injury. Damage to very delicate structures that cannot be repaired. They told me straight out, Galina Vasilyevna, you will never hear again. Unfortunately, this is permanent. At first, I just sat there and said nothing. The world became silent. It was as if I were underwater, where everything is moving, but you are not part of it. But the hardest part came later. Not the silence. Not the absence of sound. But the loneliness. Nikolai, he didn't abandon me. He became my ears, my voice. He sat with me, wrote notes, patiently explained who said what was happening. He never got annoyed. Even when he himself fell ill, even when he was breathing heavily, he still wrote to me on a piece of paper, nodded, smiled, as if nothing had changed. That's how he was. Real. Until the very end. But my son, Andrei, began to visit less often. And that's putting it mildly. And his wife, Lena. Well, she was cold from the start, but after I lost my hearing, something seemed to snap in her. She started looking at me through her teeth as if I were a burden. She often stood behind me and whispered to Andrei. Of course, I couldn't hear them, but I could see everything. Their arms crossed, their lips moving quickly, their eyes rolling. Their eyebrows frowning. I understood that they were talking about me. I read their lips as best I could, but from that angle, I couldn't make it out. However, their gestures made everything clear. Andrei stood there, nodding. He looked tired and gloomy, as if he were making excuses. I tried not to interfere. I learned to read lips and wrote notes. I stopped asking for help with trivial things. But I still felt the family's patience melting away. And Lena looked at me more and more like I was old furniture. With Nikolai, everything was different. He never got tired of me. We lived quietly, with notes and gestures, but I felt he was there. He sees me, he loves me. He respected my silence. And then, 3 months ago, I started to feel strange sensations in my ears. It was as if the air was pulsing there. There were even clicks, quiet but noticeable. As if someone was clicking a finger on glass deep inside my ear. At first, I thought it was pressure. Age. But when it became more frequent, I went to the clinic. I was referred to a specialist, an aunt. Dr. Mikhailov turned out to be young and attentive. He examined me, fiddled with the instruments for a long time, then said quietly, as if afraid of scaring away hope, Galina Vasilyevna, there's an experimental method. A new operation. Not cheap. And no guarantees. But there's a chance. I came home and told Nikolai everything. He looked at me and immediately said, let's do it. What have we got to lose? We decided everything quickly. We went for tests, found the money, and made an appointment. 2 weeks after the operation, I went out into the garden. It was Tuesday morning. I sat on a bench. I looked at the raspberries and suddenly I heard it. Quietly. Barely audible. Birds chirping. At first, it sounded distant. Then it became clearer and clearer. And now I can hear it. I can hear it, I cried. Silently. But I didn't tell anyone. Not even Andre. Not even Lenya. Only Nikolai. He took my hand, nodded, and said, "Don't rush. Wait. Listen to what they say. Find out who they are when they think you can't hear them." I didn't immediately understand why. But he already knew. He sensed it. 3 weeks later, Nikolai died. Quietly, in his sleep. His heart gave out. I was left alone. Completely alone. But with my hearing back. And with his last piece of advice in my head, be quiet and listen. The funeral was yesterday. We buried him in the city cemetery, next to his mother. Everything was dignified. The priest said kind words, the neighbors spoke about Nikolai's kindness, about his pharmacy, about how he helped people. I sat in the front row. Andre was on my left. Lena was on my right. I pretended not to hear anything. And at that moment, people behind me began to whisper. I didn't turn around. I just listened. Some recalled how accurately he selected pills. Others recalled how he would drive to help in any weather. And then I heard Lena's voice. I recognized it immediately. Thank God. She whispered to her friend Marina, "It's all over." Andre himself did not know what to do with her. She wouldn't be able to live alone. Nikolai had spoiled her. Now everything would be different. What are you going to do with her? Marina asked quietly. We've decided everything, Lena replied confidently. Nikolai left everything to Andre. Who else? She wouldn't be able to manage the money or the house. We'll find her a good boarding house. We'll sell the house. Finally, we'll start a normal life. Everything inside me was aching. But my face didn't flinch. I sat there, staring at the lid of my husband's coffin. And only one thought was racing through my head. They think I can't hear them. But I could hear them. Every word. We returned from the cemetery in the evening. It was damp and chilly. The autumn wind whipped our collars, and the leaves swirled as if they too were saying goodbye to Nikolai. Everyone walked in silence. Some whispered their condolences, others simply touched my elbow. I tried to hold on. My eyes stung, but I didn't let the tears fall. Not because I wasn't in pain, but because Lena was standing next to me. The same Lena who, an hour ago, had been discussing where to put me after the funeral. We entered the house. Nikolai and my house. But I could see in Lena's eyes that she already considered it hers. I walked around the rooms like a shadow. I spoke little, mostly just nodding. Everyone took it as silence. But I was just listening. Carefully. Because now I knew that my deafness had become a convenient mask for them. In the kitchen, I sat by the window. I pretended to be staring into space. But in reality, I was listening. Lena was talking on the phone. She spoke calmly, clearly, confidently, like someone who had everything under control. No, she doesn't suspect anything, Lena said. How could she? She can barely find her way around. Andre feels guilty, of course, but he understands that I'm right. She can't even hear the fire alarm. What if there's a fire? What if she falls again? We'll be the ones to blame. I clung to the armrest with my fingers. She talked about me the way people talk about old furniture, useless but still standing in the corner. Her voice was firm, without a hint of compassion. Then I heard Andre come in. He walked down the hall, and I recognized his footsteps immediately. He entered the kitchen. What news from the lawyer? He asked. We're still waiting. He said we have to wait for the will to be read. But honestly, it's a formality. Nikolai put everything in your name, it's obvious. He knew she couldn't manage on her own. Andre sighed heavily. I don't feel comfortable about this. Maybe we should talk to Mom? Explain what we think. And then Lena said sharply and coldly, talk? Andre, she's deaf. Even if she could hear, do you really think she would understand what we're talking about? She doesn't know what property tax is, how payments are made, how documents are drawn up. Nikolai did everything for her his whole life. You know that yourself. Andre was silent. I imagined him standing there with his eyes downcast, just like at the funeral. And inside, I was seething with anger. I knew it was a lie. I knew how Nikolai and I had taken out insurance together, calculated the budget, and chosen which bank to transfer money to when interest rates fell. He always said, you need to understand where our money is. Just in case. He respected me. And she humiliated me. Listen, Lena continued, she was naive even in the best of times. And now, even more so, she's become empty, withdrawn. She won't be able to cope. And if we drag it out, it will only get worse. What if she doesn't want to leave the house? Asked Andre. And then Lena laughed. It's cold. Does she want to? Andre, what are you talking about? She can't hear what we're saying. She'll go wherever we tell her to go. And she'll thank us. I sat downstairs in an armchair by the window. I pretended to be calm and detached. But inside, my hands were shaking. I realized that they had already decided everything for me. They weren't going to ask me. They were just going to present me with a fait accompli. And then I remembered. A couple of months before his death, Nikolai had taken me into his office. He opened our old safe, the one behind the winter coats. He showed me an envelope. This is the real will, gal, he said. Only you and I know about it. Why? I asked then. Because I can see what Lena wants. I can hear her talking. I don't like the way she looks at our house. At that moment, I honestly thought he was exaggerating. That he was just worried. But now everything has fallen into place. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun had not yet risen, only a gray dawn was spreading across the walls. I lay there and looked at the ceiling as if I were seeing it for the first time. My home.my walls. My curtains. And suddenly, strange voices, strange orders, strange decisions. Nikolai is gone. And now they're shoving new rules of life down my throat. I heard footsteps coming from downstairs. Lena was talking on the phone again. I heard her voice as soon as I approached the stairs. Yes, of course, I understand everything. I just want it to happen quickly. She is becoming more and more confused every day. We are afraid to leave her alone. Pause. Yes, of course, she has almost completely lost her hearing. But now, after her husband's death, it has gotten worse. She was dependent before, but now she is completely lost. I stood upstairs, quietly, barefoot, knowing every creaky floorboard. My home. The house where I had lived my whole life. And now they talk about me as if I were a helpless invalid who gets lost in space. Lena sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and pen. Like the mistress of the house. She had the voice of someone who had already decided everything. Of course, the house is big. But we'll manage. The main thing is to transfer her to a suitable institution. Something between a boarding house and a sanatorium. We already have some options. I sat down on the top step, holding onto the railing. My heart was pounding loudly. I was even afraid that she might hear me. I was no longer angry. I was terrified. After all, she seriously described me as feeble-minded. And the people on the other end of the phone believe her. She speaks calmly, confidently, without hysteria. And such words are easily taken as the truth. Then Andre came. What's going on? He asked, taking off his jacket. The lawyer said that it was better not to touch anything until the will was officially read. But that, as I said, is a formality. Nikolai had written everything down in advance. This is all hard for me, Andrei muttered. Maybe we should talk to Mom after all? Explain why we're doing this. And again, her icy voice. Talk? To whom? To a woman who doesn't even understand what's going on. Andrei, be realistic. She can't hear anything. And even if she can, she doesn't understand. Look at her. She's in her own world. I quietly returned to the room. I sat down on the bed. And I realized that they were moving toward their goal, step by step. They weren't just planning to drive me out of the house. They wanted to have me declared incompetent, so that they could take control of everything without a trial and without questions. And now, listen carefully, Nikolai had foreseen everything. I took out that very envelope. The one he had shown me. Our old safe was still in the closet, behind the winter coats, out of sight. I opened it. The mechanism clicked as usual, comforting in its own way. The combination was our wedding date. Inside were documents, photos, old letters. And at the very bottom was the will. The original, with signatures and seals. With a phrase that made my throat tighten. I, Nikolai Andreevich Zhukov, of sound mind and memory, bequeath all my property, savings, and movable assets to my wife, Galina Vasilyevna Zhukova. They are the most important thing. Despite her hearing impairment, she remains fully capable, reasonable, and entitled to dispose of her life independently. Any attempts to declare her incapable or restrict her will shall be considered contrary to my will. I read it aloud, to myself, and it was as if my spine straightened. There it was, the truth. There he was, Nikolai. He knew. He protected me. Now it was up to me. The next morning, everything was different. Not in the house, everything was in its place. The flowers by the window, the cup on the table, the old slippers that Nikolai once bought me for my birthday. I had changed. Inside, I knew what lay ahead of me. And I knew that from now on there would be no more spontaneous gestures. Only patience. Only observation. Lena walked around the house as if she owned it. First thing in the morning, she sorted through the mail, right in my kitchen, like a department manager. Bills, bills, bills. She muttered to herself, what a mess. Galina, how are you going to pay for all this? Here's just the utilities, half the pension. What about the land tax? And electricity? I sat opposite her, pretending to read the newspaper. In reality, I was just trying not to shake with irritation. I played the part they thought I was, a deaf, confused old woman. She came over, gently placed her hand on mine, with that condescension that really stings. Don't worry, dear, Andrei and I will sort everything out. You're not alone. We won't abandon you. Her tone was sweet, her face honeyed, but her eyes were cold and calculating. And then the phone calls started. One after another. I sat on a bench in the garden, next to the Nikolaev roses. I looked into the kitchen window, which was slightly open. And I heard everything. The first call was to some woman. Hello, hello. This is Lena Zhukova, Galina Vasilyevna's daughter-in-law. Look, we have a situation. She's alone. Her husband died. And she's, well, to put it mildly, not herself. And she's almost completely deaf. We're worried. It's hard for her to manage her money and paperwork. Could you advise us on the options for taking custody? Pause. I only heard part of her conversation. No, she has not been formally declared incapacitated. But her behavior makes it obvious. She doesn't understand what she is signing. She can't read a letter. She gets lost at night, goes out to the kitchen in her nightgown, confuses day and night. We're afraid to leave her alone. At night, in her nightgown? That was pure fiction. Once I went out to get a drink of water because I couldn't sleep. And I heard them discussing money. That's all. Next call, to the clinic. Hello, Dr. Krisanov? This is Lena Zhukova, Galina Vasilyevna's daughter-in-law. You seem to have observed her before. We would like to consult with you. Yes. We would like a specialist to come and see her, perhaps a psychiatrist or a geriatrician. Just to assess her condition. You see, she has changed completely. Hearing loss, the death of her husband, withdrawal, we're afraid she might harm herself. And she has a lot of money now, it's dangerous to leave everything uncontrolled. I clenched my fingers on my knees. Now it was clear, she was laying out the official line. Step by step, call by call, she was writing me off as incapacitated. So that later, with one document, she could take everything into her own hands. That evening, when I went to the bedroom, Andrei came up to me and said quietly, "Mom, Lena found a good doctor. She just wants you to get help. Don't be afraid. It's nothing to be afraid of." I looked at him as if he were a stranger. I played my part. I nodded without saying anything. Inside, I kept repeating, "Can't you really see what she's doing? Or don't you want to?" The doctor came 2 days later. Her name was Olga Sergeevna Chin. She was young, about 45, neat, with kind eyes and a quiet voice. Lena greeted her like a hostess, with a smile and a tone that said, "You are saving us. Thank you for finding the time. It's very difficult for us. Galina is completely lost after her husband's death. We don't know what to do. She can't hear, she can't keep track of time. Just yesterday, for example, she set the table for 2, even though Nikolai is no longer here." It was true. Once, out of habit, I took out 2 plates. Then I put one away myself. My hand just reached out on its own. Is that a symptom of the disease? The doctor looked at me gently. Can we talk for a moment? Can we be alone? Lena immediately became alarmed. Oh, I'd like to stay with you. She's afraid of strangers. She may not understand. I'm used to working with elderly patients, the doctor said calmly. We'll manage. And so we were left alone. Lena was in the hallway. Behind the door. But she didn't leave. I could hear her breathing on the other side. The doctor sat down opposite me. Slowly and clearly, she said, "Galina Vasilyevna, I know you can't hear very well. So if you understand me, just nod." I nodded. She picked up her phone, opened the Notes app, typed some text, and showed me the screen. "Do you understand where you are?" I nodded again. Next text. "Do you agree to talk without your family present?" I nodded. And then she wrote the main thing. "Your daughter-in-law scares you." I froze. I stared at the screen. For a long time. Then, slowly, clearly, I nodded. Next came the question. "Are you pretending to be weaker than you are in order to understand what is happening?" I looked her straight in the eye. And nodded. Immediately, decisively. She lowered her eyes. She typed for a long time. Then she showed me, "You are not alone. You have rights. No one can put you in an institution without your consent. I will help." I closed my eyes. And for the first time in days, I breathed freely. Someone understood. Someone believed. A few minutes later, the doctor came out. She smiled at Lena. "Thank you. I have recorded everything. Next, according to procedure, I'll be in touch later. But at least give us a rough idea," Lena said impatiently. "She needs care. Guardianship? We're very worried." "I'll put everything in writing," the doctor replied and left. Lena stood in the hallway, frowning. Something had gone wrong. I felt her beginning to lose ground. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt support. A strength awakened in me that Nikolai had once seen better than I myself. And I realized that the time for playing helpless was over. The next morning, I woke up a different person. It wasn't even about my mood. It was just that everything in my head became clear and distinct, like after a storm, when the sky suddenly becomes clear. I was no longer afraid. I knew what to do. Lena left for her yoga class in the morning. Andre was at work. The house was quiet. Only the old cat was basking on the windowsill, and the clock in the kitchen was ticking steadily, as if to say, the time has come. I got dressed, combed my hair neatly, and put the original copy of Nikolai's will, the tape recorder with the recordings, and a copy of Dr. Chin's note in my bag. And most importantly, the letter from Nikolai, the one he left me in case of pressure from the family. I called a taxi and went to the law office that Nikolai and I had known for many years. An old acquaintance, Ivan Sergeyevich Petrov, worked there. He was reliable, taciturn, the kind of person who didn't like fuss. When I entered, he looked up, surprised. Galina Vasilyevna, are you alone? Where is your son? Where is your daughter-in-law? Everything is fine. I sat down opposite him, looked him straight in the eye, and for the first time in many months spoke in my real voice. Ivan Sergeyevich, I need help. And you need to know that I can hear. For 3 months now. He froze. Excuse me? Yes, my hearing has been restored after the operation. But I haven't told anyone. Except Nikolai. And now he's gone. I took an envelope out of my bag and put it on the table. This is the will. The real one. The one that only he knows about. And then I told him everything. Slowly, calmly. About the conversations at the funeral. About how Lena and Andre decided that I had become their property. About the attempts to have me declared incompetent. About the lies to the doctors, the calls to the bank, and the legal consultations behind my back. And most importantly, I recorded everything. I added and put the tape recorder on the table. Would you like me to turn it on? Ivan Sergeyevich listened silently. His face became serious, his eyebrows furrowed. When the recording ended, he nodded. Everything you have told me falls under several articles. Pressure on an elderly person. Attempted fraudulent guardianship. Restriction of property rights. I exhaled. What should I do? First, we will officially confirm your legal capacity. We already have a doctor's note. But I will refer you to an independent specialist for additional confirmation. Second, we will send notices to Andre and Lena that they must leave your home within 30 days. Officially. With a signature. What if they don't leave? Then we'll file a report with the police. You have every reason to do so. You are the owner of the house, they are here without a contract, they are a threat, they are putting pressure on you. We will gather a package of documents and prepare everything for submission. But I don't think it will go to court. When they realize that everything you are doing is legal, they will quickly pack up. I sat and listened. And I felt my confidence returning. It was as if Nikolai was sitting somewhere nearby and saying, there you go. You're doing fine. You're doing everything right. Ivan Sergeyevich prepared copies, printed out notices, and explained what to say and how to say it. We agreed that if necessary, he would come in person and be present during the conversation. The main thing is not to give in. Speak calmly and confidently. Don't make excuses. Everything is already on your side. Thank you, I said quietly. I had been preparing for this all week. When I got home, Lena was already in the kitchen. Where were you? I called, but you didn't answer. I was scared. I shrugged. I pretended not to hear her. She continued, louder, more clearly, as if talking to a child. Galina, come on, where were you? I looked at her and nodded, everything was fine. And again, silence. The last day of my game. The final scene. Tomorrow evening, when Andre comes home from work, everything will fall into place. On Friday evening, I sat in the armchair in the living room. My armchair. My home. My calm before the storm. A folder with documents on my lap. A dictaphone nearby. On the table, Nikolai's will, a doctor's note, a letter. Everything was laid out neatly, as if in a notary's office. I was ready. In the kitchen, Lena was cutting salad while talking on the phone. Yes, we'll sort everything out. Soon. I think in a week we'll start looking for a nursing home. We found a good one, not in Tver itself, but nearby. Psychologists and doctors. Everything is in order. I listened silently. It was her last phone call in this house. At 6:15 p.m., the door slammed. Andre came home from work. He entered the living room, took off his jacket, and, as always, came up to me and leaned down to kiss me on the forehead. Hi, Mom. How was your day? I raised my head, looked him straight in the eye, and said in a calm, normal voice, very meaningfully, Andre, we need to talk. He froze. Mom? Are you talking right now? Yes. And I can hear you perfectly. For the third month in a row, I heard the clatter of plates from the kitchen. Then quick footsteps. Lena appeared in the doorway, her face pale. What did you say? I said I can hear you. And I have for a long time. I just decided not to share this discovery with you. And, as it turned out, for good reason. They both stood rooted to the spot. I stood up. Slowly. Dignified. I walked over to the table and turned on the tape recorder. Lena's voice rang out. Finally it was all over. Andre was going crazy. He didn't know what to do with her. She wouldn't be able to live alone. Nikolai had spoiled her. Lena leaned forward. That's out of context. I turned on another recording. If she is declared incapacitated, Andre will become her guardian. Then we can sell the house, move her to a facility, and finally start living like human beings. That's a lie. Lena shouted. You made it all up. You spied on us. You pretended. Yes, I pretended. Because otherwise I would never have known what you had become. I turned to Andre. You listened to all this. You kept quiet. You nodded. And then I added more quietly. You sold your mother for peace and quiet in the house. He lowered his head. His face was gray. I took the will and laid it out in front of them. This is the real document. Signed by Nikolai. Certified. The house, the money, everything is mine. And most importantly, he wrote explicitly that I am legally competent. And that any attempts to declare me incompetent are against his will. Lena was trembling with rage. It's a forgery. Tomorrow the notary will confirm its authenticity. And if necessary, the court. And if you try to pressure Andre or deceive the doctors again, I will file a complaint of fraud and an attempt to restrict my rights. I have everything documented, even your phone calls. Andre sat down on a chair and covered his face with his hands. Mom, I didn't know, I didn't want to, you know. It was just convenient for you not to get involved. While she was talking, you pretended that everything was fine. I thought we were helping. No, you were dividing my life between yourselves. You chose where to put me, how to spend money on my upkeep. But I'm not a thing. I'm alive. I'm Nikolai's wife. A mother. The mistress of this house. Silence fell. Thick as fog. I went to the closet and took out 2 suitcases. The very ones they had brought with them. You have 1 hour. Pack your things. Today you will leave my house. Either voluntarily or with the police. Lena rushed to Andre. Tell her. You can't leave your mother like this. She's sick. You need to be with her. I looked at my son. I'm not sick. I'm sober, strong, and I remember very well who you are. If you are still able to see what happened, help me with your silence. Don't justify her. Don't oppose me, and that will be enough. He stood up, he paused. Okay, Mom. We'll get together. I'm sorry. It's not a cure, Andre. But maybe it's a start. They packed their things in 40 minutes. I stood by the window. When the door slammed and the car started moving, I slowly walked through the house. I put the chair back in its place. I put Nikolai's photos back. I took off the bedding that Lena had laid out in our bedroom, opened the window, and fresh air rushed into the room. And suddenly I smiled, because now I was at home, a real hostess, not on paper, but in my heart. The house became quieter, but not with a frightening silence, but with a real, good silence, without whispers behind my back, without strangers' footsteps in the bedroom, without tension in the air. A silence where you can breathe. The first morning after their departure, I woke up on my own. No alarm clock. No strangers' voices outside the door, no smell of unfamiliar food in my kitchen. I got up. I put the kettle on. I opened the window. A normal morning. Only there was no fear. I took the sheets off the sofa in the living room, the ones Lena had laid out when she put me up in Nikolai's former study. I washed everything she had touched, rewashed it, and put it back in its place. It was like a ritual, a purification. Around noon, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I recognized the voice immediately. Galina Vasilyevna, this is Dr. Chin. Olga Sergeevna. Yes, I'm listening. She seemed to hesitate for a second. I just wanted to see if everything was okay with you. You were so persistent but reserved. And I think your story didn't end with that conversation. You're right. It didn't end. But now everything is fine. I'm not pretending anymore. And I'm not afraid. You know, she said after a pause, I rarely met patients who knew so precisely when to be silent and when to speak. I had a good teacher, I said. My husband. We said goodbye. Quietly. Without unnecessary words. A day later, I called Sochi. My sister. We hadn't spoken for several years. There were always reasons. Lena didn't recommend it, saying, why bother? And Andre said, you're already so tired. I listened to these advisors for a long time. But now I picked up the phone and dialed. Lidka? Hi. It's me. Galka? God, is that you? I thought you'd written me off. Never. There were just a lot of obstacles. We talked for over an hour. About childhood. About Nikolai. About grandchildren. About how sometimes you just have to pick up and leave. She invited me to visit. Why don't you come stay with me for a week? I'll show you the sea, and at the same time, life without Lena and Andre. I laughed. Liud, I've already started that life. But the sea wouldn't hurt. Over the next week, I did a lot. I sold the old sideboard that always took up half the living room, bulky and inconvenient. I moved Nikolai's armchair to the window, where he used to love to read. I signed up for the library. I went to a club, knitting and socializing, as they call it. Life did not become a fairy tale. But it became mine. Andre called a couple of times. He spoke uncertainly, cautiously. Mom, I don't know how now. At first, in no way, I answered honestly. Then, perhaps, humanely. But that's not up to you anymore. Lena, oddly enough, did not show up again. I heard from friends that she left Andre. They say it was quick. Apparently, she realized there would be no money here. I sat down at the table where Nikolai used to write me notes. I opened the envelope. It contained his last letter. He wrote about how strong I was. How proud he was of me. How he hoped I wouldn't give up. I read it and thought, you were right. I made it through. I kept quiet, I endured, I listened, and I persevered. And you know what I realized? Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Sometimes, only when you are alone can you hear your life for the first time. 6 months have passed. The house was quiet as always. The garden had thawed, and the roses had sprouted their first shoots. I walked along the path, adjusted the supports for the bushes, and talked quietly with Nikolai. See? I did it. Everything is as you asked. A lot has changed during this time. I stopped being afraid. I stopped expecting a catch. I stopped thinking that without someone I was nothing. Andre came twice. Once, just to sit. The second time, he brought a letter. Handwritten. It's for you. I don't know how to speak like you. But maybe I can do it in writing. I read it later. He wrote that he felt guilty. That he was ashamed. That Lena left as soon as he realized that things weren't going according to her plan. He wrote that now he sees how he indulged her. How he remained silent when he should have stood by her. And most importantly, he realized that respect for his mother was not about carrying her bag, but about not betraying her. I didn't call him right away. I thought about it. And then I wrote back, thank you. That's a start. I don't hold a grudge, I remember. And I remembered that you came. On your own. Without her. That's important. A couple of weeks later, I went to visit Lidka. My sister greeted me with pies, chatter, and her southern kindness that warms the soul. We walked along the embankment, drank tea on the balcony, and looked through old photos. And I caught myself thinking, I am alive. Not just existing, but living. When I returned home, I put a sign at the entrance that said Galina Zhukova's house, not out of pride, but for the sake of memory, so that I would know that I was the mistress here again. And so that everyone who entered would know that they couldn't just come in here only with a pure heart. Recently, I was invited to tell my story at the local library. Women gather there, women like me, with wrinkles, with baggage, with love, with losses. I came, sat down, looked at them and said, girls, I haven't heard a sound for 5 years. And then I heard everything. And not just my son's voice. I heard who was there for me. Who was against me. Don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to be silent when you need to be. And to speak when it's time. We sat for a long time. Some cried, some nodded. And I realized that being a woman is not about age. It's not what others hear. It's what she hears within herself. Sometimes in the evenings, I put Nikolai on the table, a photo, of course. I brew strong tea. I look out the window. I hear everything, both outside and inside. And most of all, I hear silence without fear. That's how I live. Not with other people's decisions, but with my own choices. Not with loud promises, but with simple actions. And most importantly, with respect. For myself. For memory. For life. Thank you for being with me until the very end. If this story touched you, please like it, write a comment. Have you had similar situations? What would you do in her place? This will help promote the video and give us the strength to create new stories. Thank you for listening. Be healthy. Live long.